Hi! Today I wanted to talk a little bit about small presses. So as some of you may know, I am an author. I have 2 books out. Here they are. And they were both published by the same small press. My second book, We Go Together, came out pretty recently, and so I've been in the midst of publishing and it's all fresh in my mind, and I just wanted to share my experience with the small press. Hopefully this will be informative because honestly, when I first learned about small press, I didn't really know where to look for information about them, and I didn't really know that they were even a thing. So first things first, what is a small press? So a small press is an independently owned publisher. It has a lot of the same features as a traditional publisher, but on a much smaller scale. So small presses will do things like editing and cover design. They may do some marketing, but it's obviously on a different schedule and a very different scale.
I somehow forgot to add that small presses accept unsolicited submissions, so that means you don't need an agent to submit to them.
So first up, I want to talk a little bit about editing. At least in my experience, the editing process has been pretty in-depth. One thing that I've noticed, and I'm not sure if this is for everyone, the edits that I got tended to be less content and more just polishing what was already there. It's not like they accepted my manuscript and then asked me to overhaul the whole thing or give me suggestions in a big long editing letter. None of that. It was more just that they took the story that I had already written and they just had suggestions on how to improve it. There would be a scene, for example, where maybe a character said something and didn't elaborate enough, and so the editor might say, like, can you explain a little bit more the character's reasoning for saying these things, or in this scene this character just kind of disappears, like, can you put them in the scene a little bit more? Things like that. Basically the entire structure of my plot stayed the same. It was just more like cosmetic things that differed. My book went through different stages of editing. The first stage was the initial edits, so it was a lot of that kind of thing I was talking about, like add this character's participation a little bit more in this one scene, or like maybe you could extend the scene and include X, Y, and Z. And also there was a lot of like mechanical things with writing, like repetitive words, repetitive verbs, basically just lists of things that I should look through my document and try and vary up certain things. The next stage of the editing was copy edits, which in my first book, I Knew Him, were kind of similar to a lot of the more mechanical aspects of the initial edits. It was just kind of like more of the same in a lot of ways, you know, narrowing down more words that I had to look through the document and change. It was basically like what I was doing with the initial edits, but even more meticulous. And finally, with the proof edits, with I Knew Him, it was again more words that I had to look up. I remember I even had to look up the word the in the manuscript and get rid of some of them. But with my second book, We Go Together, I didn't have to do that as much with the proof edits. It was more things like typos, punctuation, and like a few things here and there where the editor didn't really understand what I was going for with my wording. So overall, a very detailed process, especially with I Knew Him, because it was my first book. I was really blown away by how meticulous they got and how much time it took. And with We Go Together, I think because I have learned so much about editing through going through the whole process with I Knew Him that I was able to kind of like eliminate some of my own faults before I even handed it over to the editor. I learned a ton, especially with the first book. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the timeline of publishing. What I've noticed with traditional publishing is that the author will announce their book deal, and the book could take anywhere from a year to 2 years to actually get into bookstores, or it could even be more than that. Generally speaking, it seems like they'll finish their edits. Physical advanced reader copies will be sent out like 6 months before the release date, that kind of thing. Obviously, I'm not sure these numbers are 100% correct. This is just like things that I've observed myself. With a small press, the timeline is shorter. I Knew Him, the timeline they gave me was about 10 months from signing the contract. And I think they were actually correct in that it was almost exactly 10 months from when I signed the contract that it came out. We Go Together was a little bit different. I remember I signed the contract like 2 days before Christmas, which was a great Christmas present, and it got published August 10th. So that's like basically like 8 months. Yeah, that was kind of surprising. But yeah, with a small press, it tends to be more like get it edited, get it ready to go, and get it out the door as soon as they can. But I never felt like the book was rushed out the door. Like, we took the time to get it prepared, but once it was prepared, it was just like, boom, we're out of here. My publisher put both of my books on NetGalley, I think roughly like 4 weeks before the release. I honestly can't remember when I knew him. With We Go Together, it was definitely a month before the book came out, and I think that really helped to generate some interest in the book. So that goes right into promotion. Promoting a book with a small press is a little bit different than traditional press, from what I understand. A lot of it comes up to the author doing a lot of the work. Just because these smaller presses don't necessarily have as big of a budget, they may do some promotional stuff, but a lot of it falls on the author to do as well. I have also read that some authors who were traditionally published had to do a lot of the promotion themselves as well. It's not a given that if you were to get published by a larger publisher that they would do more of the promotional stuff. But definitely with a small press, a lot of the promotion is up to the author. And I can talk a little bit about what I have done in promoting myself. If you want to know, I can make a separate video about that. So when I was querying, I knew him. At one point, I had considered that I should maybe self-publish it because I was just finding it really frustrating going through the query process and not really getting anywhere. But the thing about self-publishing is that there are certain fees that you have to pay. I mean, technically you can do it all for free, but if you want your book to be really nice and polished, you might need to outsource editing, get a cover designer, that kind of thing. And I didn't have the budget to pay for self-publishing, and I wanted to make sure that it was the best it could possibly be. So for me, I knew that I would have to go through some sort of publisher. It was great with a small press because they wanted my book, and I didn't have to pay anything to get it published. Another really great thing about small press is that there's several that are specifically just for LGBTQ books, which is really awesome because while there are quite a few books that are being published through traditional press, it's still difficult, from what I understand, to get your book out there. And I really liked how my publisher specifically had published a lot of more niche books that were LGBTQ inclusive. Sometimes traditional publishing is not friendly to those kinds of stories. They want a very specific type of LGBTQ story that you might not necessarily want to write. Another thing that I liked about working with my publisher is that I didn't sign like a 5-book deal or something like that. I just signed for 1 book at a time. If there comes a time for whatever reason where I don't want to write with them anymore, it's not like I have to break a contract or anything, and it's just nice because I can just write at my own pace and submit when I am ready to do that. So that was my experience with a small press. I really enjoyed working with them. I would definitely continue to work with them. There are definitely certain stories that I know I really want to submit to the editor. So that was my experience working with a small press. I hope that this video was informative and gave you a better idea of what goes on. Next video, I want to talk a little bit about how to vet a small press and make sure that they are a good company and all that stuff. So stay tuned for that, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!